I never thought that at my 62 years old, I'd be driving at the 11 o'clock hour at night down unfamiliar streets, my hands trembling on the steering wheel and my heart pounding as if it wanted to escape my chest. It all started 3 hours ago, when I drove past the corporate building where Robert had worked for 25 years. The lights were off, the parking lot was empty, and a sign on the main door announced that the offices closed at the 6 o'clock hour in the evening for renovations. My first reaction was to think I had the wrong building, but no. The company logo was right there, mocking me from the dark facade. I dialed his number with fingers that were already beginning to shake. "How's work going, my love?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, normal, like the devoted wife I had been for 4 decades. His reply was immediate, rehearsed, perfect in its deceit. "Very busy here, Carol. I can't talk right now. The Asian project has all of us working around the clock. Don't wait up for me." And then I heard them. Soft moans, muffled laughter, the unmistakable sound of intimacy I thought I knew so well. My stomach churned, but my mind, that part of me that had been asleep for years, woke up with a terrifying clarity. The family GPS app, which I myself had insisted on installing after Robert had a small accident last year, now became my guide toward the truth. The blue dot representing his silver Cadillac was blinking in a residential neighborhood 40 minutes from our house, in an area of Seattle we had never visited together. With every mile I drove, I felt as if I were peeling layers off my own skin, revealing something raw and painful underneath. Before continuing, I wanted to know if you've subscribed to the channel and also if you liked the video. This helps me see that you support me and like my stories. Now, let's continue. The neighborhood was beautiful, too beautiful. Houses with perfectly manicured lawns, antique streetlights bathing the sidewalks in golden light. The kind of place where happy families lived their perfect lives. Robert's Cadillac was parked in front of a 2-story yellow house, with pots of petunias in the windows and a wooden swing on the porch. There was light in the 2nd-story windows, shadows moving behind lace curtains that looked straight out of a decorating magazine. I stayed sitting in my car, 3 houses down, watching. My mind tried to process what I was seeing, but it was like trying to put together a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. This wasn't the house of any colleague I knew. It wasn't a hotel. It wasn't an anonymous apartment where clandestine affairs are consumed. It was a home, with a mailbox that had sunflowers painted on it, and a doormat that read, "Welcome." Then I saw her, a woman, not young as I had feared, but in her mid-40s, peering out of the 2nd-story window. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing a blue silk robe that I recognized with a painful pang. It was identical to the one Robert had given me for our last anniversary, only mine was red. The woman looked out at the street with an expression of satisfaction that was more painful to me than any gesture of passion. My phone vibrated. A message from Robert. "Leaving the office now, honey. Don't wait up for me. Eat without me." The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Almost. I looked at the clock, the 11 o'clock hour and 43 minutes at night. How many nights had I eaten alone, slept alone, lived alone while he built this parallel life? A child appeared in the window next to the woman, a boy of about 10 years old, with dark, wavy hair like Robert's, with that same way of tilting his head when something made him curious. The woman hugged him, and both disappeared from my sight, probably going to bed, continuing their nightly routines in their perfect home with my husband. My husband. The words lost meaning in that moment, floating in my mind like strange objects I no longer recognized. 40 years of marriage, 2 adult children, 3 grandchildren, a whole life built on what, exactly? Lies? Half-truths? A masterful performance? The physical pain arrived then, So real I thought I was having a heart attack. I woke up in my car at the 5 o'clock hour and 47 minutes in the morning, my neck aching and my eyes swollen. The yellow house was still there, proof it hadn't been a nightmare. Robert's Cadillac was gone. I drove home on autopilot, every traffic light, every turn etched into my muscle memory after decades of living in the same place. I arrived just as Robert was walking in the front door, his briefcase in one hand and a box of Dunkin' Donuts in the other. My perpetual weakness. "Good morning, honey," he said, kissing me on the cheek with the same naturalness as always. "I brought your favorites, the Boston cream. I know I shouldn't have worked all night, but you know how these international projects are." His performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen what I saw, if I didn't know what I knew, I would have believed every word. I wondered how many years he had been perfecting this act. How many mornings had he walked through that door, with lies wrapped in bakery paper? "I was wondering where you were," I replied, surprising myself with how normal my voice sounded. "Why don't you shower while I make the coffee?" He nodded, humming that tune he always whistled when he was in a good mood. The same tune I had heard for 4 decades without knowing it meant he had spent the night with another family. While the shower water ran, I checked his briefcase. I had perfected the art of the discreet wife, or so I thought. I found the usual: work documents that seemed genuine, a tablet, company pens. But there was also something new, a second phone, one I had never seen, hidden in a compartment I didn't know existed. The screen showed several missed calls from home, and one text message. "Daddy, don't forget my soccer game on Saturday. Mum says you promised to come. Love you." Another woman named Mum, by another one of Robert's children. The frame suddenly widened, and I started to see the complete picture. The frequent business trips, always of 3 or 4 days. The weekends when he had to work. The calls he received and answered in the backyard, far from my ears. The credit card purchases that never arrived home. I had been so stupid, so trusting, so blind. But no, I corrected myself. I hadn't been stupid. I had been a wife who trusted her husband. I had chosen to believe, chosen not to see, because the alternative was unthinkable. I remembered specific moments now, with painful clarity. Like that time, 15 years ago, when I found a jewelry store receipt in his pocket. "It's for my boss's secretary's birthday," he had said. "You know how he is. He always sends me to do his personal shopping." And I had believed him. Or when, 10 years ago, our daughter Lucy told me she had seen Daddy at the mall with a lady and a little boy. "It must be some colleague's sister," I had replied, downplaying it. "Daddy is always helping people." Lucy was 15 years old then. The boy in the window last night would be about 10 years old. The math was cruel in its precision. I heard Robert turn off the shower. I put everything back in its place, each object exactly as I had found it. I had learned a lot about deceit in the last few hours. When he came out of the bathroom, hair damp and wearing that cologne that I myself religiously bought him every Christmas, I already had the coffee served and the donuts on a plate. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, biting into his donut while reading the news on his iPad. "Like always," I lied, discovering that false words came easier than I had imagined. "And you? Were you able to rest at all at the office?" "Slept a couple of hours on the couch in the conference room," he replied without looking up. "Peterson was snoring like a bear in the next office." Peterson. I remembered that Peterson, his supposed late-night project partner, had retired 6 months ago. We had celebrated it at a dinner where Robert gave a moving speech about teamwork and loyalty. The irony made me nauseous. "Carol, are you okay? You look pale," Robert said, touching my forehead with a concern that seemed genuine. I waited 3 days before returning. 3 days in which I perfected my own performance, smiling at the right moments, responding to his lies with the expected credulity, making love with him one night while imagining the other woman in my place. Robert didn't suspect a thing. After all, I had been predictable for 40 years. Carol, the devoted wife. Carol, the perfect mother. Carol, the fool. This time I was prepared. I dressed in clothes I wouldn't normally wear, jeans and a hooded sweatshirt I had bought with cash, large sunglasses, my hair pulled back under a baseball cap. I looked like another person, and maybe I was. The Carol from before had died in that car 3 nights ago. I arrived at the Yellow House at the 2 o'clock hour in the afternoon, when Robert was definitely at the office, the real one this time. I had verified by calling his direct extension. The neighborhood was quiet, only the occasional sound of a dog barking or a gardener working. I parked on the same street, but closer this time. I needed to see. I needed to understand. The woman came out at the 2 o'clock hour and 30 minutes, and my heart nearly stopped. Not because of her, but because of what she was carrying. A baby in a front carrier. A baby no more than 6 months old. The mathematics of betrayal suddenly became more complex. It wasn't just the 10-year-old boy then. Robert had been building this family for how long? I followed her on foot as she started walking through the neighborhood. I kept a safe distance, pretending to look at my phone when she stopped. I watched her go into a local coffee shop, one of those cozy places with tables on the sidewalk and hanging plants. I sat down at a table away from her, ordering a coffee I had no intention of drinking. She met 2 other women, both with babies. I listened to them talk about mundane things, diapers, sleepless nights, the exhaustion of motherhood. And then, one of them said something that chilled my blood. "Tracy, you are so lucky that Mike is so involved. Not all husbands are that dedicated, Mike." My Robert was Mike in this life. Tracy laughed, adjusting the baby in her arms. "Yes, although with his work hours it's complicated. Sometimes he has to travel for business 3 or 4 days, but he always makes up for it when he comes back. He's a wonderful dad." The business trips. Those 3 or 4 days were when he returned to me, to his other life, to his other, already adult children. We were shifts in his elaborate calendar of deceit. I wondered if he had a spreadsheet somewhere, coordinating his lies, making sure not to mix up names, dates, stories. "And how is Mikey doing with the new baby?" another woman asked. "Jealous at first," Tracy replied. "But Mike, my husband, has been incredible at handling the situation. He bought him a new bike, and they spend Saturday afternoons together while I rest with the baby." Saturday afternoons. The Saturday work seminars that Robert never missed. Another piece of the puzzle fitting with nauseating precision. I got up to leave, but then Tracy took out her phone to show photos. I couldn't help but look as I walked past her. There was Robert, my Robert, in a family photo on the beach, tanned, smiling, holding the boy on his shoulders, while Tracy, pregnant in the photo, smiled beside him. I recognized the place. Miami Beach, the same hotel where Robert had had a crucial medical conference last year. I stumbled out of the coffee shop. On the way back to my car, I passed a park where several children were playing. I stopped dead when I heard a familiar voice. "That's it, champ. Kick harder." It was Robert, my Robert, who was supposed to be in a meeting with Asian investors, coaching a children's soccer team. The boy from the window, Mikey, ran toward him with a smile that was a mirror of his father's. I watched him for 20 minutes, this man I thought I knew better than myself. I watched him be the father he had been with our children when they were small, but with an energy, a presence that was painfully familiar and strangely alien at the same time. It wasn't acting. It was genuine. He was a father loving his son, a man in his element. Who was the real Robert then? The man who ate breakfast with me every morning, or the one who coached soccer on Wednesday afternoons? The one who made love to me on Sunday mornings, or the one who took another family to the beach? Did a real Robert exist, or just carefully crafted versions for each audience? My phone rang. It was him. "Hello, honey. The meeting ended early. Want me to stop and pick up something for dinner?" I looked toward the park where he was still shouting instructions to the team. "That would be perfect, darling. Bring wine, the red one we like. The California Cabernet, I know. I love you, Carol." "I love you too," I replied, the words ash in my mouth. That night, as Robert slept beside me with the quiet breathing of a guiltless man, I got up and went to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, studying every line, every mark that time had left on my face. 62 years old, 40 of them devoted to a man who had built a double life with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. The tears finally came, silent at first. Then sobs that I had to muffle with a towel so as not to wake him. I wasn't just crying for the betrayal, but for the woman in the mirror. Who was I without him? Who had Carol been before she became Mrs. Robert Hamilton? Memories of my youth seemed to belong to another person, the girl who wanted to be a painter, who had won a scholarship to study in New York, which she had turned down because Robert had convinced her that starting a family was more important. "Art will always be there," he had said then, with that smile that melted my defenses. "But the time to have children won't." And I had believed him. I had put away my brushes, exchanged canvases for diapers, galleries for PTA meetings. I didn't regret my children. Lucy and Michael were the best part of my life. But what had become of Carol the artist? Had she completely dissolved into Carol the wife? The next day, while Robert was in his real office, or maybe his parallel life, I couldn't be sure anymore. I went up to the attic. There, in dust-covered boxes, I found my old art supplies. The brushes were stiff, the paints dry, but the sketches were still there. Testimony to a talent I had abandoned for love, or for what I had believed was love. I also found letters, photographs, memories of our life together, our wedding, with Robert promising before God and 200 guests that he would be faithful to me until death. Lucy's birth, Robert crying while cutting the umbilical cord. Michael taking his first steps, Robert filming it with that old camera he loved so much. Real moments, genuine emotions, or so I had believed. At what point had the lie begun? My phone rang. It was Lucy. "Mum, are you okay? I've noticed you've been acting weird lately." My daughter, always so perceptive. "I'm fine, honey. Just a little tired." "Are you sure? I can stop by if you want. The kids are asking for Grandma." The kids? My grandchildren, Robert's official grandchildren. I wondered if they knew they had an uncle and an aunt in that yellow house, siblings they would never meet. The web of lies extended like a poisonous spiderweb, touching innocent lives. "Better Sunday," I replied. "Daddy will be home." Lie. Sunday afternoons, Robert had golf with clients. Now I knew it was probably family time at the Yellow House. After hanging up, I returned to my investigation. The bank statements I had ignored for years now made sense. Regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize, purchases at stores we had never been to, medical expenses that didn't correspond to any illness of ours. Robert had been maintaining 2 homes, 2 complete lives, and I had been too trusting, too comfortable in my ignorance to notice. I found bills for private schools, for music lessons, for summer camps. Mikey played the violin, apparently. The baby, whose name I still didn't know, had been born at St. Jude's Hospital, the same one where our children had been born. The audacity of the deceit was almost admirable in its brazenness. That afternoon, I did something I had never done. I hired a private investigator, a discreet man recommended by a friend who had gone through a difficult divorce. I need to know everything, I told him. How long? How did it start? Everything. Are you sure you want to know everything? He asked me, his voice laden with experience in shattering lives with truths. Yes, I replied, though I wasn't sure of anything except that I couldn't continue living in this play. Robert arrived that night with flowers, white lilies, my favourites, or the favourites of the Carol he thought I was. I no longer knew what I really liked, what preferences were mine, and which ones I had adopted to please him. You look beautiful, he said during dinner, taking my hand. The private investigator, a man named Johnson with tired eyes that had seen too many secrets, came to the house a week later. Robert was on one of his business trips, that is, playing happy family at the Yellow House. Johnson spread a folder on my dining room table, the same one where we had celebrated 40 Christmases, 40 birthdays, a whole life of lies. Mrs. Hamilton, what I'm about to show you is not easy to digest, he warned, his voice professionally compassionate. Are you sure you want to continue? I nodded, my hands trembling as I opened the folder. The first page was a marriage certificate. Mike Stephen Smith had married Tracy Lynn Miller 12 years ago. Marriage. Not an affair, not a mistress, but another wife. In some country that allowed polygamy, maybe it would have been legal. Here it was bigamy, a crime. But this is illegal, I stammered, my mind trying to process the information. Technically, yes, Johnson replied. He used false documents, an alternate identity that he has perfectly maintained for years. Robert Hamilton and Mike Smith are the same person, but legally they exist as two different individuals. It's a professional job, ma'am. Your husband is no amateur at this. The following pages were worse. Photographs of Robert and Tracy's wedding, an intimate ceremony on a beach. She was in a simple white linen dress. He had that smile I thought I knew so well. Birth certificates, Mike Jr., born 11 years ago, 3 months after Robert had an emergency medical conference in Houston. Sophia Tracy, the baby, born 7 months ago, when Robert was at a corporate leadership retreat. There's more, Johnson said, moving to another section. Your husband has properties under his alternate identity's name, the house where the other family lives, a condo on the coast, a cabin in the mountains, all paid for in cash, without mortgages that could raise suspicion. My inheritance, my mother's inheritance, who had died 15 years ago, leaving me a considerable sum that Robert had wisely invested for our retirement. Now I knew where that money had really gone. He had financed his other life with my dead mother's money. How is that possible? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. How can someone live like that for so long? Johnson shrugged. I've seen similar cases, though none this elaborate. Your husband runs 2 businesses, one under each name. The second is a consulting firm that justifies his additional income and his absences. It's brilliant, in a twisted way. I continued reading. School records for Mikey, excellent student, captain of the youth soccer team. Medical reports for Tracy, fertility treatments that Robert had paid for years before she could conceive. They had struggled to have children, just like us at the beginning. The irony was poisonous. There's something else you should know, Johnson said, clearly uncomfortable. The other woman, Tracy, she doesn't know about you. For her husband is a widower. The story he told her is that his first wife, Carol, died in a car accident 15 years ago. I was dead. In Robert's narrative for his other family, I was dead. He had metaphorically killed his wife so he could have another one. I wondered if he ever, while making love to Tracy, thought about the dead wife who slept in another house, in another life. Is there something about why? I asked, needing to understand the motivation behind so much elaboration. Johnson took out another folder. I discreetly interviewed some acquaintances in both circles. Apparently, your husband met Tracy when she was his physical therapist after his knee surgery. The knee surgery. I remembered those months perfectly. Robert, complaining about the pain, going to therapy 3 times a week, slowly recovering. I had been busy taking care of my sick mother then, trusting that he was following his treatment alone. He had planted the seeds of his other life, while I held my dying mother's hand. Tracy got pregnant shortly after, Johnson continued. From the dates, it seems your husband decided to keep both lives instead of choosing. Maybe because of the children, maybe because of the finances, maybe because he could. The financial documents suggest he manages nearly $3 million in assets between both identities. $3 million. Money he had inherited, earned, stolen perhaps, to maintain his empire of lies. I got up abruptly, running to the bathroom where I vomited until there was nothing left but bile. Johnson waited patiently, professional until the end. What do you want to do with this information? He asked when I returned. I wanted to scream, to burn everything, to confront Robert with the evidence of his crimes. But a strange calm came over me. I need time to think. Can you get me more information about his finances? Everything, every account, every investment, every single cent. Of course. Are you considering a divorce? I'm considering justice, I replied, surprising myself with the coldness of my voice. I spent the next 3 days in a hotel, telling Robert I was visiting my sister in another city. I needed space to think, to plan, to decide who Carol would be after this. In the solitude of that impersonal room, with Johnson's folders spread out on the bed like evidence of a crime, I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to cry in silence while Robert continued his double life. I wasn't going to disappear discreetly with a quiet divorce that would allow him to maintain his facade. I was going to systematically destroy the house of cards he had built, but I would do it with the precision of a surgeon, not the fury of a scorned wife. First, I needed allies. I called Michael, my son, who was a lawyer specializing in corporate law. Son, I need your professional help with something delicate. Can you come to the Marriott Hotel downtown, room 512? Michael arrived within an hour, worried. Mum, what's wrong? Why are you in a hotel? I showed him everything. I watched his face transform from confusion to disbelief, then to a cold fury that I recognized as my own. I'm going to destroy him, he finally said, his voice lethal. Bigamy is a federal felony, fraud, tax evasion, document forgery. No, I interrupted him. I don't want him to go to jail. I want something worse. I want him to lose everything he values, but have to live to see it. Michael looked at me with new admiration. What do you have in mind? I explained my plan. It was complex. It required patience, acting, and a cruelty I didn't know I possessed. Michael listened, occasionally suggesting improvements, legal refinements that would make everything airtight. We'll need Lucy, too, he said. She handles public relations for that big firm. She'll know how to manage the media aspect when everything explodes. Lucy reacted differently. She cried for an hour. Then she got furious. Then she cried again. How could he? She kept repeating. How could he do this to us? But when she calmed down, her strategic mind took control. We need to control the narrative. When this comes out, and it will come out, We need Daddy to be the undisputed villain. I also needed an unexpected ally. I called Robert's sister, Pamela, with whom I had always had a good relationship. Pamela listened in silence as I told her everything. Then she sighed deeply. I always knew something wasn't right, she admitted. The trips, the excuses, the way he sometimes got confused with details. I thought it was a mistress. I never imagined this. I need access to your mother's safe deposit box, I told her. Pamela was the executrix of my mother-in-law's will. Robert keeps important documents in there. Carol, Pamela said after a pause, my mother always liked you more than him. She used to say you were too good for Robert. You'll have what you need. The plan took shape over the next few weeks. I hired a second investigator, this one specializing in financial fraud. He discovered that Robert had been systematically evading taxes, using his double identity to hide income. A forensic accountant tracked every transaction, building a case that would make the Internal Revenue Service shake. Michael prepared legal documents, not for an immediate divorce, but to freeze assets at the precise moment. Lucy cultivated media contacts, preparing them for the story of the year. Prominent businessman, lives double life for a decade. I returned home to my role as the devoted wife. Robert didn't suspect a thing. Why would he? He had maintained his deception for so long that arrogance had made him careless. He kissed me every morning. He called me from his office every afternoon. He made love to me with a passion that now made me nauseous. One night, while we were having dinner, he spoke about the future. I've been thinking about retirement, he said. Maybe in a few years we could travel, see the world like we always wanted to. That sounds wonderful, I replied, pouring him more wine. Where would you go first? I noticed the conditional tense, but he didn't. Italy, maybe. Or Greece. Places with history, with art. I know how much you like art. The art I abandoned for you, I thought, smiling. It would be perfect. He continued talking about his dreams, our supposed plans together, unaware that I was counting down the days until his destruction. The following 6 weeks were a masterpiece of acting. I became the most perfect wife Robert had had in years. I cooked his favorite dishes. I waited up for him no matter how late he worked. I initiated sex with an enthusiasm that pleasantly surprised him. I was the Carol from our honeymoon, but with a dark purpose he couldn't imagine. You're radiant lately, he said one morning, hugging me from behind as I made coffee. What's changed? I decided to value what we have, I replied, my voice poisoned honey. Life is short, don't you think? Meanwhile, the pieces of the plan moved like a clock. Michael had discovered that Robert's consulting firm, as Mike Smith, had won several government contracts using insider information obtained from his identity as Robert Hamilton. It was corporate fraud on a grand scale. Lucy had planted seeds on social media, anonymous accounts that began asking questions about the mysterious Mike Smith and his resemblance to Robert Hamilton. Nothing accusatory yet, just enough to create a murmur. The financial investigator found the grand prize, an account in the Cayman Islands with $5 million, money Robert had been diverting for years. It was our money, my mother's inheritance money, joint investment money, all hidden for his eventual escape, perhaps. But the master stroke came from Pamela. In her mother's safe deposit box, she found my father-in-law's real will, not the version Robert had presented. In the original, everything was left in a trust for the grandchildren, with Carol, me, as the administrator. Robert had forged documents to inherit everything himself, another federal crime. One afternoon, I followed Robert to the Yellow House. This time I didn't hide. I parked right in front and waited. I watched him get out of the car, but not like the Robert I knew. This man walked differently, more relaxed, younger somehow. Mikey ran into his arms, and Robert lifted him, spinning him in the air as the boy laughed. Tracy came out with the baby, and the scene was so domestic, so perfect, that I finally understood. Robert wasn't acting there. That was his real life. I was the obligation, the youthful mistake, that he couldn't correct. This family was what he truly wanted. The knowledge didn't hurt as I expected. Instead, it gave me clarity. I wasn't destroying a marriage, I was exposing a lie. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. That night, Robert came home late, smelling of baby powder and with a ketchup stain on his sleeve, probably from dinner with his other family. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing me distractedly. "The meeting ran long." "No problem," I replied, noticing the child's drawing sticking out of his briefcase. "Did you eat dinner?" "Ate something at the office," he lied easily. "But I'd love a glass of wine with you." We sat on the couch, him talking about his fictional day, while I nodded at the appropriate moments. At some point, he rested his head on my lap, an intimate gesture from our early years. "Are you happy, Carol?" he asked suddenly. The question took me by surprise. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I've lost something, that at some point I took a wrong turn and can't find my way back." It was the most honest he had been in years, and for a moment I almost felt pity for him. Almost. "We all make choices," I replied, stroking his hair. "The important thing is living with the consequences." "I guess you're right," he sighed, closing his eyes. Michael called me the next day. "Everything's ready. The documents are prepared. Lucy's contacts are waiting. The IRS has been anonymously notified. We're just waiting for your signal." Friday, I decided. During the anniversary dinner. Our 40th anniversary was in 2 weeks. Robert had reserved the most exclusive restaurant in the city. He had invited our closest friends, family. It would be public. It would be devastating. It would be perfect. "Are you sure?" Michael asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." I thought about Tracy, ignorant that her husband was a bigamist, about Mikey and little Sophia, who would lose the father they knew. They were victims too, but I couldn't save them without destroying myself. "I'm sure," I confirmed. 40 years of lies end Friday. Le Cirque restaurant shimmered like a jewel on the Manhattan night. Robert had reserved the entire main ballroom, an extravagant gesture even for him. Crystal chandeliers projected golden light onto Egyptian linen tablecloths. Every table was adorned with white orchids and red roses, the colors of my wedding bouquet 40 years ago. A string quartet played Unforgettable, the song from our first dance. Every detail had been meticulously planned, a masterpiece of public romance that concealed private rot. I wore the blood-red dress I had bought specifically for this night, a daring design that hugged my figure, with a neckline Robert would have considered inappropriate just a few months ago. I had my hair done in an elegant updo that exposed the diamond necklace my mother had left me, the one Robert didn't know I had retrieved from the safety deposit box. The makeup was dramatic. Red lips, smoky eyes, a war mask disguised as glamour. Every guest who arrived commented on how radiant I looked, not suspecting that my glow was that of a freshly sharpened sword. Robert wore his Brooks Brothers navy suit, the one he wore for the most important occasions. The silk tie I myself had given him for our 30th anniversary. His gold cufflinks, inherited from his father, flashed as he moved his hands to greet the guests. He had gone to the barber that afternoon, his silver hair perfectly cut, his beard carefully trimmed. He looked like what he pretended to be, a successful man, celebrating a life of love and fidelity. "You are absolutely spectacular," he whispered as he helped me with my chair at the main table. His hand brushed my bare shoulder, an intimate gesture for the audience. I can't believe you still take my breath away after all these years. You are the most beautiful woman in the room. And you the biggest liar, I thought. But my smile was perfect, trained over weeks of practice in front of the mirror. You don't look bad yourself, my love, I replied, the term of endearment burning my tongue like acid. The 50 guests were a careful selection from our life, Robert's business partners, who needed to witness his fall, society friends who would spread the scandal like wildfire, family members who deserved to know the truth. I had placed them strategically, Michael and his wife Elaine near the improvised stage, ready to intervene. Lucy and her fiancé Daniel at a table with a perfect view of the projection screen. Pamela strategically located near the exit, in case Robert tried to escape. Dinner began with oysters, which Robert detested but had ordered because he knew they were my favorite. Another public gesture of devotion. Conversations flowed with the California sparkling wine, Schramsberg from the year of our wedding, a detail that had cost a fortune and that Robert had boasted about at least 3 times. Robert has always been the perfect husband, commented Martha Collins, the wife of Robert's main partner, as she savoured her lobster. Carol, you are so lucky. You have no idea. I don't, I replied, my smile unwavering. Robert, sitting next to me, squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture others interpreted as love, but which I recognized as possession. At the 9 o'clock hour and 30 minutes, when the Belgian chocolate desserts were served, Robert stood up, gently tapping his glass with a knife. The quartet stopped playing. Conversations ceased. All eyes turned to him. Dear friends, families, he began, his voice rich and deep, the voice he had used to seduce me 4 decades ago. 40 years ago, in a small bookstore downtown, I met a woman who would change my life. Carol not only became my wife, but my best friend, my confidant, my partner in every adventure. I saw some women discreetly drying tears. Martha sighed romantically. The men nodded approvingly. It was a masterful performance. These years haven't always been easy, Robert continued, his voice trembling with feigned, or perhaps perversely real, emotion. We've faced losses, challenges, moments of doubt, but Carol, my Carol, has been my anchor, my safe harbor in every storm, the light that guides me home every night. The irony was so bitter that I had to take a sip of water to keep from choking. Every night he supposedly guided home, he chose another direction, another home, another woman. That is why Robert took a blue velvet box from his pocket. I want to renew my vows here, in front of all of you. He opened the box, revealing an eternity band with diamonds. Carol, will you do me the honor of continuing to be my wife for another 40 years? Applause erupted. Someone yelled, "Bravo!" Phone cameras flashed. It was the perfect moment, the romantic climax of the night. I stood up slowly, accepting his kiss amidst the ovation, the heavy, cold ring on my finger. My turn, I announced as the applause died down, my voice clear as the crystal I was about to shatter. 40 years is a long time, long enough to know every secret, every truth, every lie about a person, or so one would believe. Robert smiled, his hand still on my waist, completely oblivious to the abyss opening beneath his feet. I've prepared something very special for tonight, I continued, taking my phone out of my purse. Michael had already connected the restaurant's audio and projection system to my device, an arrangement that had cost a generous tip to the technical staff. A gift, not just for my husband, but for all of you, because Ruby anniversaries, dear friends, require absolute transparency, like the purest crystal. I hit play. Robert's voice filled the room, clear, unmistakable. Tracy, my love, I'm heading home now. Yes, I know Mikey has his game tomorrow at the 8 o'clock hour. Don't worry, I told Carol I have a conference all weekend. She never suspects anything, believe me. It's almost pathetic how easy it is. The silence that followed was absolute, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Robert's champagne glass fell from his hand, shattering against the marble floor into 1,000 pieces that reflected the light like crystal tears. That's not what, he began, his face changing from tanned to white to grey in seconds. Oh, but wait, I interrupted him, my voice now sharp as the broken glass at his feet. There's so much more. The screen came to life with the photographs I had meticulously prepared. Robert and Tracy at their beach wedding. Him in a white linen suit I had never seen. Mike Jr.'s birth certificate, with Mike Stephen Smith listed as the father. Christmas family photos from the last 10 years. Robert smiling with his other family in front of a tree I had never decorated. Sophia's ultrasound with a dedication. To the best daddy in the world. With love, Tracy. Gasps began like waves, each revelation provoking a new round of shock. Martha Collins had gone pale, her hand covering her mouth. Robert's partner, Jim Reynolds, looked at the images with a mixture of horror and fury, probably calculating the damage to the company's reputation. Pamela had buried her face in her hands, sobbing silently. 40 years, I said, walking slowly around Robert, who remained frozen like a statue. 40 years living with a bigamist, a pathological liar, a criminal. Yes, dear friends, a criminal. Bigamy is a federal felony with prison time. Carol, please. Robert finally found his voice, reaching out to me with his hands. We can talk about this in private. Don't do this. Michael stood up, interposing himself between his father and me. Don't come near my mother. His voice was lethal, controlled. And before you consider running away, you should know that the IRS already has copies of all your financial statements, including that Cayman Islands account where you hid $5 million. The prosecutor's office has the fraudulent contracts you signed using your fake identity. Lucy took the microphone that the quartet had abandoned. To our dear guests, I deeply regret that you are witnessing this, but after 40 years of public deception, we felt the truth also had to be public. My father not only betrayed my mother, he betrayed all of us. This is insane, Robert spun around, seeking support among the guests, but everyone recoiled as if he were contagious. Charles, you've known me for 20 years. You know I wouldn't... Wouldn't what? Charles, his best friend, stood up, his face a mask of disgust. That you're not capable of this. Apparently, I don't know you at all. I took the envelope from my purse, the divorce documents Michael had prepared. You have two options, Robert. You sign these documents now, renouncing all claims to our communal property, or this goes to public trial, and you end up in federal prison for bigamy, tax fraud, and document forgery. Pamela stood up then, her voice trembling but firm. Robert, you should also know that I found Dad's real document. The one you forged is with the authorities. Mum always knew something wasn't right with you. It was the final blow. Robert collapsed into the chair, the powerful man reduced to rubble. With trembling hands, he took the pen I offered him. As he signed, tears fell onto the documents, staining his name, his final surrender. The events following the anniversary dinner unfolded like perfectly aligned dominoes, each one knocking down the next with devastating precision. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the balcony of the hotel apartment where I had taken refuge, watching the city lights flicker while my phone vibrated incessantly with calls and messages I wouldn't answer. The red dress still hung on my body like war armor, the smeared makeup tracing maps of pain on my face. At the 6 o'clock hour in the morning, Michael arrived with coffee and his laptop. The divorce documents are processed. Father signed them last night. There are witnesses. It's irrevocable. We also froze the joint accounts an hour ago. His efficiency was implacable. The lawyer taking control where the son might have hesitated. At the 7 o'clock hour in the morning, Lucy arrived with her public relations crisis team. 3 young women with tablets and determined expressions transformed my suite into a command center. The press embargo lifts in 2 hours, Lucy announced. Her professionalism barely concealed the fury burning beneath. We have exclusives with 3 major newspapers and 2 national television channels. The hashtag is already created. By noon, the whole country will know who Robert Hamilton really is. At the 9 o'clock hour in the morning, the story exploded. Prominent businessman lives double life, bigamy, fraud, and 12 years of deceit. The headlines screamed from every screen. The bigamist of the year became a worldwide trend in minutes. The photos I had provided of Robert with his 2 families went viral. Cruel but creative memes bloomed like mushrooms after the rain. The hotel phone rang. It was the front desk. "Mrs. Hamilton, there are reporters in the lobby requesting statements." "Tell them my lawyer will give a press conference at the 2 o'clock hour in the afternoon," I replied. My voice was surprisingly steady. By the 11 o'clock hour in the morning, Robert's company had issued a statement. Effective immediately, Robert Hamilton has been suspended from all his duties pending an internal investigation into serious ethical violations and possible corporate fraud. Jim Reynolds, his partner, was more direct in his interview. "We are fully cooperating with the authorities. If the allegations are true, Robert Hamilton not only betrayed his family, but also the trust of his partners, employees, and clients." At the 3 o'clock hour and 47 minutes in the afternoon, my phone rang from an unknown number. It was Tracy. Her voice sounded like broken glass, every word cutting and fragmented. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. "Are you Carol, the dead wife?" "His first and only legal wife," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, without cruelty, but without solace. "I never died, Tracy. He metaphorically killed me so he could have you. I'm sorry. You are a victim in this too." "The children?" Her voice broke into a sob. "My God, the children. Mikey adored his father. The baby? What do I tell them? How do I explain that their whole life is a lie?" "I don't know," I admitted, because there were no words of comfort that could heal those wounds. But children are resilient. With help, with therapy, with true love, they will heal. "Did you know about us?" she asked. "How long did you know?" 2 months, I replied. Only 2 months of truth after 40 years of lies. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered. "The house is in his name, the accounts, everything. I have nothing of my own. I quit my job when Mikey was born because he insisted." It was another level of cruelty from Robert, keeping her completely dependent. "Give me your information," I heard myself say. "My lawyer will contact you. You are not responsible for Robert's crimes. We'll make sure you and the children are financially protected." "Why?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Why would you help me?" "Because destroying Robert doesn't mean destroying 2 innocent children," I replied. "They didn't ask to be born into a lie." The next day, the IRS arrived like a biblical plague. Federal agents appeared at Robert's office, at our house, at the Yellow House. Boxes of documents were confiscated, computers, hard drives, even his collection of luxury watches was catalogued and seized. The investigation revealed a labyrinth of tax evasion that dated back 15 years, offshore accounts, shell corporations, fake invoices, a scheme so elaborate that it required a team of 20 forensic accountants to completely untangle it. Michael handled the legal aspect with the precision of a surgeon and the coldness of an executioner. Using the bigamy laws, which in our state included the automatic annulment of any financial claim from the bigamous spouse, he voided all of Robert's rights to our joint properties. The house valued at $2 million, the 3 investment properties, the stock portfolio, everything passed exclusively into my name. "We also recovered this," Michael said a week later, handing me a check. $3,700,000 from the Cayman account. The rest is so entangled in his shell corporations that it will take years to recover, if at all possible. Pamela visited me that afternoon. She had aged 10 years in a week, her face marked by family shame. "Mum always knew something was wrong with Robert," she confessed, sitting heavily on my hotel couch. Before she died, she told me, "Take care of Carol when the truth comes out." I think somehow she knew. "How is he?" I asked, hating myself for worrying. "Destroyed," Pamela replied bluntly. "Tracy kicked him out of the house. No hotel in the city will take his reservation. His face is all over the news. He's living in a roadside motel, paying cash with the little that wasn't frozen. He tried to contact some friends, but they all hung up. He's a pariah, Carol, a man without a country." 3 weeks after the scandal, I was summoned to testify before the grand jury. The room was full, every seat occupied by people eager to hear the story firsthand. I wore a simple black suit, no jewelry except my original wedding ring, which I wore as a reminder of the woman I used to be. For 4 hours, I recounted everything, every lie, every discovery, every piece of evidence. The jury members listened with expressions ranging from sympathy to horror. When I showed the photos of Robert's double life, an older woman in the front row shook her head, muttering, "God forgive him," because I couldn't. The prosecutor, a young but brilliant man named Martin Reed, was meticulous. "Mrs. Hamilton, at any point during those 12 years, did you suspect your husband's infidelity?" "There were moments," I admitted. "Small inconsistencies, strange absences. But Robert was a master of manipulation. Every time I got close to the truth, he would create an explanation so elaborate, so believable, that I felt guilty for doubting." "Can you give an example?" 5 years ago, I found a jewelry store receipt for a diamond necklace I never received. When I confronted him, Robert took me to the jewelry store. The manager, who had obviously been coached, explained that there had been a mistake, that the necklace was for the wife of an important client of Robert's, who had asked for help surprising her. They even showed me the returned necklace. Of course, now I know he simply bought it later for Tracy. "How did you feel when you discovered the truth?" I took a moment before answering. At first, denial, then pain. A pain so deep I thought it would tear me in two. Then came the anger, not hot, but cold, calculated, and finally determination. Determination that 40 years of lies would not define the rest of my life. The grand jury's verdict was unanimous. Formal indictment for bigamy, tax fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Robert faced up to 20 years in prison. A month later, Robert called me from the county jail where he was awaiting trial. His voice was unrecognizable, broken, aged. "Why, Carol? Why didn't you give me a chance to explain privately?" "Explain what, Robert? How you accidentally fell into another life for 12 years? How by mistake you married another woman? How unintentionally you had 2 more children?" "It wasn't like that, Carol. She got pregnant. I couldn't abandon her." "But you could abandon me. Every day for 12 years you abandoned me. I loved you, Carol. I always loved you." "No," I replied with a clarity that surprised me. "You loved the idea of me, the perfect wife in your perfectly compartmentalized life, But you never loved me. Carol, the real woman with her own dreams and desires. You turned me into a character in your elaborate fiction. The children, his voice broke. My other children. What will become of them? Tracy and I have reached an agreement. They will receive financial support from the recovered assets. They will not suffer economically for your crimes. You and Tracy, you talk? The victims of the same criminal sometimes find solace in mutual understanding, I replied. Carol, please, I just want to… No, Robert. You have no right to want anything from me. You had 40 years of my life. You won't have another second. I hung up. It was the last time I would hear his voice. 2 years have passed since that anniversary dinner that changed everything. This morning, as I made coffee in my new kitchen, with a view of the city rooftops and the sun streaming through windows I chose all by myself, I received a notification on my phone. Robert had been released for good behavior. I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, not even curiosity. The man who had been my husband was a stranger now, a character in a story that had happened to another Carol, one who no longer existed. My art exhibition opened last month. Portraits of an Invented Life, I titled it. Each piece told a part of the story. The blind wife, the woman waking up, the architect of her own liberation. The critics were extraordinary, but more importantly, every brushstroke had been therapy. Every colour a small victory over the past. At the opening, a man approached me. He was a widower, a retired literature professor, with kind eyes and a genuine laugh. Your work moves me, he said. There's so much pain, but also so much hope. We had coffee afterward, then dinners. There's no rush, no expectations, just two people who understand that life can begin again at any age. Michael called me yesterday. Dad tried to contact me, he said. He wants to meet with the family. And? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I told him his family was us for 40 years. He chose another. Now he has to live with that choice. My son, my fierce protector. Lucy was less diplomatic. She simply blocked his number. Pamela visits me sometimes. She tells me Robert lives alone in a one-bedroom apartment. He works as an accountant at a small firm that doesn't do background checks. Tracy doesn't allow him to see the children until they are older and can decide for themselves. It's a grey, monotonous existence, honest for the first time in his life. But this story isn't about Robert. It never really was. It's about Carol, about me, about the woman who emerged from the ashes of a false life to build a real one. Yesterday I found my old diary, from the time before Robert. The girl who wrote those pages dreamed of New York, of painting in Soho, of a life full of colour and passion. At 64 years old, I'm finally giving that girl what she deserves. Next month I fly to Italy alone, with my brushes and a light suitcase. It's not the scholarship I turned down 40 years ago, but it's my money, my decision, my life. I'll rent a small studio near the Hudson River, paint until my hands hurt, drink cheap wine with artists who know nothing of my history. As I pack, I find our wedding photo. Robert and I, young, radiant, ignorant of the future. I don't rip it up. I don't burn it. I simply put it away in a box labeled fiction, because that's what it was. A beautiful, terrible fiction. My phone rings. It's Ethan. That's the literature professor's name, though the name no longer makes me flinch. Ready for our salsa class? He asks. Yes, I'm learning salsa. Also Italian, sculpture, and wine tasting. Every day something new. Every experience an affirmation that life doesn't end with betrayal. That 60 is not the end, but a new beginning. Give me 10 minutes, I reply. applying the red lipstick that Robert said was too daring for my age. Everything is daring now. Every day is an act of courage. Every decision a declaration of independence. Before leaving, I look at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me has wrinkles that tell stories, grey hairs she doesn't hide, eyes that have seen too much, but still shine with hope. She is beautiful, not in spite of her age and her history, but because of them. "Hello, Carol," I say to my reflection. "It's good to finally meet you." And then there's one more twist to this story, one I didn't see coming. This morning, as I organized papers for my trip, I found an envelope that Johnson, the investigator, had left. "Open it only when you're ready," he had said. Inside was a letter from my mother, written shortly before she died. A letter that Robert had intercepted and hidden. "My dearest Carol," it read, "if you are reading this, it is because you finally set yourself free. I always knew the truth about Robert. I followed him once. I saw the other woman, but you were so fragile after losing that pregnancy, so dependent on him, that I was afraid the truth would destroy you. I was a coward. I'm sorry. To make amends, I've left another account, one Robert doesn't know about, just for you. The key is where we always hid treasures when you were a girl. Live, my love, live for real this time." The tree in my childhood backyard. I ran there, to the house now sold, but whose new owners allowed me to search. Buried among the roots, a metal box. Inside, documents for a Swiss bank account with enough money to live 100 lives. My mother had given me freedom posthumously, not just financial, but emotional. She knew. Someone had known and had chosen to protect me until I was strong enough to protect myself. I didn't need the money anymore, but I would use it. For a women's shelter, for art scholarships, for all the Carols trapped in golden cages. My story ends where it began, with a discovery, a revelation, a truth that changes everything. But this time, the truth doesn't destroy, it frees. And I, Carol, at my 64 years old, am finally free.